Well, it has been a while, but I'm back. Took some time off to focus more on myself, just to I was kind of lagging on certain things, and I felt like I needed to, get them back to the standard where it should be. And I feel like I'm in a good enough position now to keep going with my morals, practice what I preach. Yeah, here I am. Took some time off to get a little leaner, we definitely the leanest I've ever been. I've been on cut for at least I want to say 3 months now, but I feel like we're getting somewhere. I feel like we're getting somewhere, looking pretty decent. But yeah, here I am. I'm back, and today I want to talk a little bit about conflict and how there's no shame in avoiding it. If you know this anime called Vinland Saga, there's a quote from the main character Thorfinn, which is kind of like probably the most infamous quote in the entire series, which is, "I have no enemies." The whole principle of his character in the anime is that at the start of it, he's very driven by revenge and driven by this desire to avenge his father, who is killed very early on in anime. It's not a spoiler, you should have watched Vinland Saga by now if you haven't. But his father's killed really early on in the anime, and he's forced to live with the man who killed his father for the early years of his life, up until he's a late teen. For the years he's living with this guy, he wants to kill him. He's going to eventually have a duel with him, which he said he's been promised to him when he's ready for it. And when that time comes, he realizes that he no longer bears any hatred towards Asalad, the guy who he's trying to kill, the guy who murdered his father. And before he can really get the chance to duel him, he's killed by someone else. And he dies without ever having avenged his father. Also, while realizing that the hatred he bore for him didn't stick around. Throughout the years he stuck with him, he didn't really hate him anymore. And then he kind of loses his identity. He gets sold into slavery. He lives his life completely differently. But then he has this kind of awakening where he decides to abandon all this, bloodshed and hatred and all the negative things which he kind of fueled his rage upon throughout the early years of his life, because Thorfinn was a soldier, and he decides to abandon that all, and he lives under the philosophy that he has no enemies. Now, not all anime are going to be applicable to real life, but I feel like this quote is something I personally remind myself day to day whenever I'm in a situation where I feel like I should remind myself of it, because I think it's true. You really don't have any enemies. It is much more fun and much more fulfilling in your life if you go about it with that mentality. Everyone you meet has something to offer. Everyone you meet who you may feel like being conflictuous towards you have had just as hard of a life as you've had. They wake up every day feeling tired. They have days where they don't want to do things. They have family issues. They have mental problems. They have all the issues you have. And when you have those days where you just feel so antisocial, maybe they're having one of those too. Maybe they just walked into this place where you just happen to be with them at the same time, and they're just having an awful day. And maybe, unfortunately, you're their outlet at that moment. But put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Would you do the exact same thing if you were in their position? Most people would. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's human. We kind of want to displace our aggression and our pent-up frustration upon something, right? Eventually. So, unfortunately, sometimes that's other people. And we do more harm to them because of how much harm we're feeling within ourselves, which is just an unfortunate thing we do as people. But the strong man and the one who lives under the principle of having no enemies feels sorry for that person, empathizes with that person, tries to understand that person. And I feel like people don't realize there's more shame in encouraging conflict than there is avoiding it. It's looked down upon. It's looked down upon to avoid a fight. It's looked down upon to avoid an argument. It's looked down upon to walk away from these things, especially as a man, because you're supposed to stand your ground, and in many cases you should. If things get violent, don't just sit there and take it. You gotta stand your ground, but that's the last resort. You don't need to go around looking for a fight or partaking in ones where you feel like there could have been an easier option to get away from it. Conflict is not really what we should strive towards as people. It's something we instinctively jump towards when we have to, because that's just an instinct of ours as animals. It's needed. You know, if we didn't have that instinct to protect ourselves, to, you know, stick up for those we love, then we'd be submissive. We wouldn't be the top of the food chain, but we are because of that. However, you and I probably both know our instincts are not always correct in every circumstance, especially with how many modern applications of our instincts can be misapplied these days, especially with lust and greed and everything. There's so many ways to be corrupted by those, and this aggression, this wrath, this is another one of those as well, which can be easily misapplied. So don't chase conflict. Again, there's more shame in indulging in it than there is avoiding it, and there's no shame in avoiding it either. In fact, I encourage you to live under the principle that you have no enemies. Everyone is your friend. What reason do you have to hate anybody you've just met? What reason do you have to hate somebody who's going through just as hard of a life as you are? It's hard to realize that everyone we meet day to day is living just as complex and as intricate as a life as we are. Ain't that crazy? Everyone we encounter in our life are just as complex as you. You have your hobbies, you have your interests, you have your trials, your tribulations, but so does your next guy, and so does everyone you meet. Maybe some people don't do as much as you do, but they still have thoughts, and it's hard to really conceptualize that everyone in this world is just as complex as you are. So why not be interested in their life just as in how interested you are in your own? It's the principle in, if you've read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, becoming genuinely interested in other people is one of the best social skills you can have as a person, because everyone's interested in themselves. I mean, this is a bit of a tangent here, but I feel like it's important. Everyone's interested in themselves. Everyone wants to tell you about themselves, but if you're the one who's interested in other people more so than yourself, that's probably one of the best social traits you can have. And again, not encouraging conflict is a good way to segue into that, you know, asking questions, becoming interested in the other person. That is a nice way to do things. I don't really have much else to say about this. I just kind of wanted to put forward my beliefs on something I feel quite strongly about, and I'm very, very proud of myself for having this trait for the majority of my life. I've never had a fight. I've never really had a super heated argument with someone that's been close to turning violent. Yeah, I have argued. Yeah, I've disagreed. Yes, I've contradicted. I've had these things. I've criticized many people, but never have I really saw them as anything other than human. And I have my upbringing to thank for that, but I also have my own introspection and values to thank for that. And I feel like that's a value everyone should share, you know, regardless of what kind of person you are. You should take this belief. And I mean, again, Vinland Saga, great anime to watch for philosophy. And, you know, if you're trying to, you know, stay productive and, you know, keep a good mindset while watching something entertaining. I know I've made a video about this in the past as well, but Vinland Saga is a great watch. I mean, if you haven't watched it, I highly encourage it too. So yeah, nothing really else to say. Again, I'm back. I'm gonna be posting more regularly, and yeah, strive for greatness. Don't be a vape puffing nerd.